Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Getting In a College Coach Conversation. I'm Sally Ganga from College Coach. If you've ever been curious about a liberal arts and sciences college and concerned about the return on investment at the same time, or just wondered what their advantages are compared to traditional large public or medium-sized schools, this is the show for you. Our first two segments are all about liberal arts colleges. For the first segment, I'll be chatting with Michael Yeager, who you'll see if you are actually watching this on screen instead of listening. He's newly to College Coach, and he worked at St. Lawrence in New York State and Wheaton College in Massachusetts, both small liberal arts colleges, as an admission officer. I will then be following up with Alexander Gonzalez, one of our college finance experts, about the return on investment of liberal arts colleges. So he's going to be doing a little more of the number crunchy type of stuff with us. And then we'll be following all that with an office hour segment for you seniors regarding what to expect from your early applications and turning to your regular decision schools. But first, let's just say hello to Michael. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, thanks, Sally. Glad to be here. Excited to talk about something that I've been really passionate about and been fortunate enough to have great opportunities working at small liberal arts campuses. And so definitely looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, anybody who listens to this show regularly knows that I went to Reed. I'm a huge champion of liberal arts and sciences colleges. So I'm more interested. I will certainly chime in on this discussion, but let's especially try and get your point of view. So tell me what we discussed this right before now. You went to Ithaca, which is more of a mid-sized school. When you transitioned to working at a liberal arts college, what are some of the real advantages that you saw?
Yeah, I mean, right away you get to know a lot of people and a lot of decision makers. And I think that's really an awesome thing for a student to have on campus. I mean, within a couple of weeks of me starting my position at St. Lawrence, I know the name of the person who's pouring my coffee in the morning. I'm playing basketball against the dean of one of the schools at lunchtime. And so you just have access to people that are in critical, important decision-making roles. And so when you have something in your life that comes up, you know who to turn to, or you know who to turn to, and then they can turn to someone else and make that connection for you. There's just that immediate network at a small liberal arts campus is something that really students can take advantage of if they engage in the community.
I mean, one of the things that I always thought was notable when I was a college student, my brother and sister both went to UC Berkeley, and I decided against it because for me personally, it was just too large. For my brother in particular, it worked very well. For my sister, less so. And what was notable to me is like, I could just walk in to the financial aid office when I had a question about my loan. My sister would be on hold for hours. Of course, these days, everything can be automated. Or everything's over the internet. But like just the fact that I could get that FaceTime. And not only that, I remember walking in once and the assistant, the administrative assistant looked at me and said, "Yeah, your check's in. I just need your signature." I hadn't even gotten anything from her yet. You know what I mean? Like I hadn't even gotten a note, but she knew who I was. And I knew to come in, and she knew my name, and I signed it, and I was out of there in less than 5 minutes. And along the way, there was lots of smiling and how you doing,
Yeah. Yeah, I think for student support services at liberal arts colleges, that's a big deal too. When you have access to a writing center, or you're struggling with a personal issue and you need access to counseling services. I mean, there are a lot of students, especially in their first year on a new environment, that they're going to have a lot of needs. And so being able to walk right in, as opposed to setting up an appointment online, waiting 2 weeks to get in front of someone, your issue may be done at that point. And it may be moved to another level that's a little bit harder to deal with. In my experience as an employee, I would go around and try to seek faculty to come and present at our open houses. And, a lot of times it was easy. I would just walk through a building, and some people would either hide from me because they knew I was working in the admission office and I had something for them. Or they would come right out and say, "Hey, Mike, what's going on? When's the next open house? How can I help?" And so again, that personal connection is just huge for students that are going to be entering an entirely different environment. And I think some of them think that, especially at the beginning of the process, that bigger is better, that going to a campus with 40 or 50,000 people will be this amazing experience. And I don't know how people have the bandwidth to have that many friends. I mean, I'm at the phase of my life where I have, 3 or 4 friends and I'm overwhelmed. I can't imagine trying to build connections with that many people. And I think that's the benefits of a smaller college, where you can build those interactions really quickly, and you can build them in volume based on what your interests are and what you're getting involved with in the campus community.
Yeah, a friend of mine, when I was a college student, he was a transfer from UCLA, and when I asked him why he transferred, he said actually that it was actually counterintuitively harder to meet people, that he would have these great discussions with interesting people, and then he'd never see them again. Whereas he and I got to know each other just like walking past each other, chatting. We started eating together in the lunchroom sometimes. He was a friend of a friend. It was like, he's like, this didn't happen for me at the very large, very fine public institution that I was at. And he wanted that kind of more natural connection. So I think that is a real advantage. At the same time, I always like to emphasize to people that you don't actually know everyone. And I thought I knew everyone at my college, but when I was at graduation, I did not know the people sitting on either side of me. Like, I literally didn't recognize them. And I was like, how is this possible? But I just think, I don't know, they were physics or chemistry majors. And I knew some physics and chemistry majors, but like there was no other way for our paths to cross, I guess. And so these particular students, I just hadn't met, and I was astounded by that.
Yeah, I think people think it's similar to high school, where you're in that same community, and so it's going to be the same group your entire college experience. Well, college is different. You have a new first year class coming in every year, and so even if you're at a campus that's as small as 2,000, you're replacing a quarter of the population. You're getting 500 new and different, diverse people on your campus every single year, and so and that's very different than high school. And I don't think a lot of times the students that are looking at a place that has so few students, that they're thinking about the turnover, and this is going to be a different environment every single year, especially if they're planning on taking advantage of one of the hallmarks of a liberal arts college, which is going abroad for a semester. And I think a lot of small liberal arts places will talk about the benefits of having that global education and getting out and expanding your views, and that's something where you're going to be away building all new friendships in an entirely different and uncomfortable and amazing environment. And that's something that small liberal arts colleges do really well too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk too about some of the other things that small liberal arts and sciences colleges do well. Like, what do you see as the advantages of, the smaller classes, for example?
Yeah, smaller classes, accountability. I mean, I think back to when I was a 17-year-old young man developing good habits. And so the nice thing about being at a classroom space where there's 20, 30 kids in an intro course is faculty know if you're not there two classes in a row, so you may get an email, you may get a knock on the door. Whereas if you're in an auditorium style classroom with several hundred students, you may not have that personal attention. I mean, the classroom experience itself, once you're actually there and in the room, your voice is going to be able to be amplified. I mean, I think it's harder to raise your hand and stand up in a class of 250 of your peers that you have not met yet and engage in that type of environment. Whereas if you're only around 20 to 30 folks, just taking that first step to engage in the classroom experience can be daunting for a lot of students, especially if you're an introvert, and having that smaller, more safe environment where maybe you've already seen a few of these students in passing, or one of them's living down the hall from you. I think that can open up those academic doors a little bit more quickly for some students.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, even I'm a pretty talkative person, but I was pretty shy in my first history classes that weren't just for first year students because of the other students who were in there. But really by my sophomore year, I was talking as much as anybody else. And so I think that sort of support to talk is really helpful. And I mean, college professors aren't like high school teachers, they're not necessarily going to call on you. But one of the things that I did notice is that they would I think a lot of the best professors would sort of make sure that there was space for everyone to say something. And I mean, I had a French class. This was obviously not an intro one, that was only 6 students. So I had another history class that was about the same size. So yes, the downside is there's no place to hide. I mean, I believe me when I say I did my homework for those classes, but which I actually thought, was a good thing. But you also just, I think, get a lot more out of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that opportunity to engage with your classmates outside of the classroom a little bit easier too. There are even some small liberal arts colleges that offer that classroom space that's one-on-one. I mean, you can find the classes get down even smaller than your French class in some places, and so having that interaction is just, I think, critical to help students challenge themselves and find others that have different beliefs and have those important conversations that is really what college is all about outside of the classroom. And I think being in that small environment definitely helps facilitate that.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really important point, right? Like on the one hand, some students have made the point that often smaller colleges might be less diverse. And I would say it depends on the small college. I worked at Whittier, which is actually, I think, the student of color population is over 50% at this point. I mean, white students are still the largest population of the subgroups, but so you can get diversity at a smaller college. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is that if you go to a larger school, you might not be having these intense conversations with people who really disagree with you. So you bring up a really, really good point there. Like at a small college, there is an expectation that you will participate in class and maybe find out how much you do disagree with your peers or agree with them.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of the experience. I mean, for college, a lot of the learning is going to happen outside of the classroom, just by the nature and by design. I mean, you're only going to be in classroom instruction for, 3 or 4 hours a day, and then you have all this other space to fill. And how are you planning on doing that? And obviously, at a smaller campus community and a smaller campus environment, you're going to be introduced to a lot of different things pretty early on, because at those smaller environments, you need people to be engaged and do different things. I remember, when I worked at Wheaton, there was a student who was a talented unicyclist. And once people found out about that, it was like, okay, well, now we need this student for the halftime show of the basketball game. So let's get with the dance team and let's choreograph something. And then it was the theater department that needed, to add this student to the shows. And so I think those types of connections, once someone knows you have that skill set at a small environment, they're going to look to help you grow and develop in ways that are going to be helpful for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had at Reed, the math department for some reason had all these very talented jugglers. I don't, to this day, have no idea what the connection was, but for some reason, all the jugglers were in the math department, or most of them were anyway. And yeah, at first they were just juggling on their own, but once people realized it, like, we asked them to perform on the student union steps at a regular basis. And so these very shy math majors who fit the stereotype of what you might think a student might be like we're out there in front of crowds and we were cheering for them. And they were talented enough actually that when we brought like entertainment, we would never bring jugglers, because when we did, they were never as good as our actual students. Which I thought, they'd get discouraged because we wouldn't cheer, because we'd be like, yeah, we've seen that before. Like Joe in the math department does a better job than at that than you do. So
I think that, that also bleeds into the curriculum when you talk about the interdisciplinary opportunities that students have. And so at all the campuses I worked at, we had artists working with computer scientists on different projects. And so the opportunity for research was just so vast, and you could make those connections cross discipline really easily, because it was one conversation with a faculty member that you could roll over to their office and say, hey,
Mhm.
I was studying this, and I think my, what I've been studying in computer science applies to studio art, and this is how I want to build that bridge. This is how I want to take the next step in terms of my research. And having that access is really helpful in terms of building a student's overall understanding of interdisciplinary work and how it helps them develop as a professional.
Mhm. Yeah, I worked at I also worked at Whittier College, and I had students doing like film and English combined majors there, things like that. And it was the same thing where it wasn't an established department, but because it was such a small college, it was really easy, to put things together. And I certainly saw a lot of that at Reed as well, like just that sort of ability when you're having face-to-face conversations with people. I think they tend to be kind of more flexible. They also know you and they know your level of seriousness. And I think that's a real advantage as well. Another thing that I wanted to touch on too is I feel like opportunities to do research is really high at a small liberal arts and sciences college. So not only interdisciplinary work academically, but like the opportunity to do research as an undergraduate just strikes me as higher at liberal arts and sciences colleges than most any other schools. And that seems counterintuitive to people because they're like, well, there's not as much research going on, but I always remind them, yes, UC Berkeley has amazing research going on, but mostly it's graduate students. There are exceptions to that. I was wondering what your observations on that were.
Yeah, I think, at a small liberal arts college, the likelihood that you're going to be taught by faculty is high, especially if they don't have graduate students on campus. I mean, if it's a traditional liberal arts place, faculty are going to be the ones that teach. They're going to be the ones that are interacting with you and working with you as a student. You may have some TAs for some courses, but for the most part, faculty are going to be teaching you. And so they know who the talented students are, and they know who they want to tab to join, to have them come with them for research projects, or they have some availability that opens up when students come to them and present them with an idea or a project. And so, being able to stand out is a lot easier in that smaller environment in terms of what's available in research. At St. Lawrence and at Wheaton, there were a lot of students that were applying for, Fulbrights and Trumans and Watsons and Rhodes, super impressive scholarships, and a lot of students that received those. And percentage base, I'm sure they stand up really well against some of these other bigger research institutions. And they still have the academic support in place to be able to do that. And so if a student does have some of those aspirations, I think that's something that a lot of liberal arts colleges will be able to promote and talk about.
Yeah, I think Williams College might be number one in terms of sort of percentage. I could be wrong about that, but Reed is fairly high in that as well. But to be blunt, Reed suffers because of the lack of undergraduate sports. I mean, there is some sports, but apparently Rhodes like athletes. So Reedies do really well in Fulbrights and stuff like that too, though. And actually Whittier had 4 Rhodes Scholars by the time I was there. So I think, yeah, even smaller colleges like Whittier, where, they're really admitting a majority of the students who apply, I think what they do with those students is really, really remarkable. And I think a lot of that is the access to faculty. One thing I always like to throw this out there, and I'll just be transparent that, again, it's because I went to Reed, and Reed is really high on this list. If you look at the National Science Foundation's list of the baccalaureate origins of PhDs. So in other words, if you parents have a student who wants to maybe get a PhD in science or engineering, you might be surprised to know that small liberal arts colleges actually outrank the Ivies and the larger schools. If you look at it by percentage, by sheer number, it's UC Berkeley, it's Cornell, it's University of Michigan, it's University of Illinois, et cetera. But if you look at it by percentage of the student population, after there's Harvey Mudd, Caltech, MIT, and then it's Reed. And then there are other institutions like Swarthmore, Caltech, Bryn Mawr, et cetera, et cetera. So I bring this up because I can just imagine someone listening to this going, well, that's all well and good, but how do they actually know that it's better than these larger schools? And, we have some actually pretty good data, I think, to back that up. So is there anything else that you would want to emphasize? I mean, I think that we should talk. I mean, I'll be talking about some of this with Alex in my next one too, but what are some of the benefits beyond access to faculty and them helping you get access to like research and things? I think it's really notable the skills that you develop being in that smaller classroom. So what are some of those skills that you would highlight?
Yeah, I think with a more structured curriculum, which a lot of these schools will have, you do have a little bit more balance. So being able to still pursue and acquire language skills, super critical to employers. Being able to be able to have that balance in terms of the arts and the sciences, even if you're going on to pursue technical careers in something like engineering, or if you're looking into business programs, we all know that being more broadly educated, being able to have conversations with diverse groups of people, having soft skills are
Mhm.
huge, and not just in terms of getting in the door as a potential employee, but also your development and growth over time. And so again, the interdisciplinary approach and that defined curriculum, that yes, students are going to take courses in some different subject areas to build that base. That's, I think, something that has always been marketable to employers, and will continue to do so.
Yeah, good communication. I don't care if you're doing something completely math focused. If you're not a good communicator, you might still be able to get that first job, but you're not going to continue to be promoted. I thought that the being forced to defend my point of view in these small classrooms that use kind of the Socratic method was so valuable for me in every workplace going down, in the rest of my career. So that's just the one example that really comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and
So,
you see that if you look at alumni giving, percentage of students who are donating back to a school, you see a lot of liberal arts colleges rank particularly high when it comes to percentage of alumni who are still engaged in the community, because their affiliation is with the school, not with a subset of the school because it's so big that it had to be broken up. So, when you attend a school that only has 2,000, that's a shared experience that everyone
mhm,
has. They're all eating at the same places and going to the same events. And so it's more of a shared experience. And I think that's where a lot of those smaller places do better in terms of percentage of alumni giving as well.
absolutely. All right. Well, I think that covers it for now, but thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hopefully you'll invite me back again sometime.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We will. All right. So we'll be taking a short break, but when we return, I'll be talking with Alexander Gonzalez about the return on investment for liberal arts colleges.